In this tutorial, I'm going to show how you can accept marketplace payments in your Bubble app using Stripe Connect. As you can see here, the user is purchasing a pair of shorts for €30. He's making this payment via Stripe. But when we look at our Stripe dashboard in a second, what we're going to notice is that the €30 payment is split between the platform and also the merchant. The merchant is going to get €24 from the sale, but the platform, which is the Bubble app in this scenario, is going to get a €6 application fee. I'm also going to show how you can allow sellers to sign up to Stripe Connect and set up their own Stripe Connect accounts via your app. As you can see here, we have it built into the sign up flow so that when a user registers as a seller, they're automatically directed to the Stripe Connect onboarding screen where they'll begin to fill in the relevant details. Finally, I'm going to show how you can allow users to access their own Stripe Connect Express dashboard and see any outstanding balances that they are due from any sales they may have made. Throughout this tutorial, I'm going to be using the Stripe Connect Marketplace plugin. It's a paid plugin that I've developed myself, and you can find this plugin by going to the Plugins tab in your Bubble editor and searching for Stripe Connect Marketplace. Once you have the plugin installed, we're going to need to put in a few API keys to get it up and running before we can start building any workflows. For the purposes of this tutorial, I assume that you have already registered for Stripe and that you've enabled Stripe Connect. There are plenty of tutorials out there on how to do that, so I'm not going to delve into it. Once you have done that, go onto your Stripe dashboard, click on the Developers tab, and then click on API keys on the left-hand side. You'll see your publishable key and your secret key when you do this. To start off, copy your publishable key and paste it into the publishable key section of your Stripe Connect Marketplace plugin tab. We're then going to repeat the same step for the secret key. Please note that this secret key and the publishable key we've previously pasted in are the test keys. If you want this plugin to run in live production mode of your Bubble app, you'll need to toggle away from test mode within your Stripe dashboard. We'll come on to that in a minute. Now that we've pasted our secret key into our plugin tab, we're going to paste one more key in. We're pasting the secret key one more time into the API development key field. What's important here is we need to put bearer and space before the secret key in order for this to work correctly. We now have our 3 development keys in, and like I mentioned, if you want to run this in live production mode, you need to get your actual live keys. To get these keys, you simply toggle away from test mode in your Stripe dashboard. You would then repeat the process we've just completed, but instead paste the keys into the top 3 fields in our plugin tab. For the rest of this tutorial, I'm going to be demonstrating how to build the necessary workflows using a demo app that I've created specifically for this demo. I'll link to it below in the description, and I've left the editor public, which means you can actually view all the workflows yourself if you want to go over them again. The demo app has 4 separate sections, and we've already completed the first section of setting up the plugin. So we're going to go on to allowing users to create their own Stripe Connect account by connecting the Stripe Connect onboarding portal. So let's go back to our Bubble editor. Let's go to the design tab and let's check out the workflows associated with this button. I'm going to delete the existing workflows and recreate them just so you can see what goes into it. And if we look at the instructions on the demo page, you'll see the first step is to use the Stripe Connect Create Express Account work action to actually create a Stripe Express account for the merchant that's being onboarded. You'll see there are a number of fields that we need to fill out here. The first one is the 2-digit country code for the country from which the user, i.e. the merchant's business, is legally based in. I'm from Ireland, so I'm going to use the IE digit code to represent Ireland as my country. If you click on the Show Documentation button, you'll be able to get a link to a page where country codes for a large range of countries are available. You can also make this field dynamic and allow your users to choose which country should be the setting for their business. The next field we need to fill out is the email of the user or merchant that's being onboarded. I'm using a dummy email here, but in reality, when you're building your own app, you're likely going to use something like current user's email or something like that. The next field is payout interval. This specifies on what time schedule the merchant is going to receive their funds from Stripe. The default here I've chosen is daily, and if you choose daily, the user is going to get paid out at the next available day. This varies depending on what country you're in because of Stripe's rules, and it also depends on how recently you've signed up and verified your Stripe account. If we change the payout interval to weekly, the user or merchant is actually going to receive their funds on a rolling weekly basis. And if we do choose weekly, we're also going to need to set a weekly anchor. This is a specific day of the week that the user will receive the funds. You can see here I've set Friday as a weekly anchor, which means that the user will receive their funds from Stripe every Friday. If we went for a monthly payout interval, this would mean, as you'd imagine, that the user is going to get paid out every month on a specific date. We set that specific date by setting the monthly anchor. You can see here there's numbers between 1 and 31, and the user will be paid out on whatever day of the month you choose as the monthly anchor. For now, I'm going to leave the payout interval as daily, which means our user will get paid in the quickest time possible. That finishes step 1 of our instructions, and we can move on to step 2, which is saving the newly created Stripe account ID to our user in the database. It's worth taking a look at the custom fields that I've created for the user data type in our database. You can see there's 4 custom fields, and it's the last one, Stripe account ID, that is relevant for this part of the workflow. So let's go back to our workflow and let's go to step 2, and that's going to be making changes to the current user. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the Stripe account ID that was created in step 1, and we're going to use that and save it down to the user. You can see there we're going to result of step 1 and taking Stripe account ID. We're also going to change this user's seller to yes, and this is just to identify that this user is indeed a merchant rather than someone who is purchasing goods. So that's step 2 complete. As you'll see from our instructions on the demo page, the third step is to create a link to the Stripe onboarding portal. To achieve this, we're going to use the Stripe Connect create onboarding link action. And as with all workflow actions involving this plugin, you can find that action underneath the plugin section within our workflow actions. There are 3 fields that we're going to need to fill in for this action. The first one is the Stripe account ID of the merchant. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to take this directly from step 1 of this process. You might remember in step 1 we created a Stripe account ID, so we can just take that and put that in the first field there. We're also going to need to put in a refresh URL and a return URL. The refresh URL is where the user is sent if for some reason the onboarding link doesn't work, or whether it's expired or something like that. The return URL is where the user is sent after they've successfully completed the onboarding process. And what I'm going to do for both of these URLs is just take our main home URL for the demo page and put in a parameter afterwards. For the refresh URL, I'm going to put in refresh equals true. And similarly for the return URL, I'm going to put in return equals true. You'll notice I have a question mark just before this, and this is just to signify that it's a separate parameter within our URL. So that's step 3 of our process completed. And the final step in terms of the onboarding is to navigate to the link that we've just created in step 3. This is probably the easiest part of the process. It's simply going to navigation, opening an external website, and we're going to take the result of step 3 and use that as the URL that we're going to navigate to. You can see that URL is coming in as an option. Now that we've completed the workflow, let's actually go through the onboarding process to see what it looks like. Once we click on the Create Express Account button, you'll see we're being redirected to the Stripe Connect onboarding portal. Just a note, Qualified is the name of an app I previously built, which is why you're seeing that name come up. First thing I'm going to do is change my phone number to an Irish number, and I'm going to use a test number just for the purposes of this tutorial. Because I use a test number, I can use a test code. Of course, if you're using your real phone number in this scenario, you would need to put in the verification code that Stripe sent you. The settings here may be slightly different depending on what country you're based in. In Ireland, I'm going to be called an individual or a sole trader. And Stripe are then going to ask me to include some of my personal details. I'm going to use some dummy data here just so we can see what it looks like. We're then going to select what industry we're based in. I'm going to choose software, and I'm going to put in my own website here. This is a section where you put in your bank account details, and again, this may be slightly different depending on what country you're based in. Again, because I'm only doing this in test mode, I'm going to use test account details for this part. You'll see that we're nearly there, but Stripe have indicated there's some missing details that I need to complete before the onboarding is finished, and they relate to proof of address and proof of identity. So because I'm in test mode here, I'm going to use the test documents, but in reality, if a merchant was being onboarded via this portal, they'd need to upload some ID verification, and again, these will be different depending on different countries, and also some address verification. You'll notice you will be able to complete this onboarding process without providing these documents, but charges will not be enabled unless you complete these steps. So basically, your merchant will not be able to accept payments unless they do verify their address, if that is required in the territory they're in. All the details seem to be good to go here from my dummy user account, so I'm going to submit those details. And you'll see the Stripe is going to redirect me to my Bubble app. And this is where the return URL that we input into one of our workflow steps is going to come into play. If you look at the URL bar here, you'll notice that it includes the phrase return equals true. I've put in a pop-up just to let the user know that they've been successfully onboarded. I'll come back to how you trigger this in a minute. But now just taking a look at our Stripe Connect section, you will see that we have a new user that's been onboarded, and it's that test user 123 at testmail.com. You'll see that payments are enabled, and that's because I did upload all the required information. And if you scroll down, you'll see the two API calls we made to actually register this user. There was creating the account and then also navigating to the portal. Now that we've onboarded our test user, I just want to go back to what happens when the return equals true parameter is fed through to the apps page on returning from the Stripe Connect onboarding portal. You'll see there that that pop-up is showing up, and I briefly just want to go through the setup involved in what's triggering that. First of all, going to our design tab, you can see I have that success pop-up built. It's not visible by default. But we have two workflows here that are relevant, and they're both quite similar except for one condition. You can see here one has one single action and the second one here has two. The first action from this one is showing the pop-up, and the second action is changing the current user's charges enabled to yes. There's two conditions that need to be met for this workflow to be triggered. The first one is the page's URL needs to have a return parameter, and that parameter needs to equal true. As you can see here, that is indeed the case, as we put that in as our return URL originally. The second condition is the user needs to be able to accept charges on Stripe. And the way we check this is we're going to use one of the data calls associated with the Stripe Connect plugin to retrieve the current user's details and check whether their charges are enabled on Stripe. I'm now going to recreate these two conditions from scratch just so you can see how they're built. The first one we're going to look at is we're going to check the URL of the page to make sure the return parameter is in there and that parameter equals true. So the parameter name is going to be return. I only want to run this workflow when return is true. The second condition is we want to put in an and first of all, just so that this workflow only runs when the two conditions are true. And we're going to get data from an external API. The API provider is going to be Stripe Connect retrieve account details. Importantly, for the path account ID here, you should be putting in the current user's Stripe account ID. There's a whole range of data you can get via this Stripe API call, and we're going to get the charges enabled one, and we're going to make sure that equals yes. So the user is going to have charges enabled in order for that workflow to run and for the pop-up to show. You can see for the other workflow, the conditions are exactly the same, but the one difference is I'm changing charges enabled to no, just so the success pop-up message does not appear when the user does not have charges fully enabled. Now that we've gone through how to onboard users and allow them to set up their own Stripe Connect account, let's go through how to actually process marketplace payments using the Stripe Connect plugin. You can see here there are 3 steps involved in making marketplace payments, and we're going to go through these one by one. All the workflows again are fully visible, so take a look at the editor if you do want to see it in more detail. What you'll see is there's actually 2 workflows associated with the marketplace payment button. They're quite similar, but they do rely on one condition, and that condition is we're checking whether the current user's Stripe Connect charges enabled is yes. So again, we're using that retrieve account details API call that we previously used. And if the user hasn't their charges enabled because they haven't set up their Stripe Connect account properly, instead of going through the process of actually making the marketplace payment, I'm just after scrolling back up to the onboarding section to prompt them to successfully input their details. You'll see I've also put in a conditional statement on the button here so that again, if their charge enabled is not yes, then they are going to be shown please connect your Stripe Connect account instead of marketplace payment. Now, if the user has successfully connected their Stripe account and charges are enabled, we can go through these 3 steps. You'll see there are quite a number of fields that we need to make sure have the right inputs, and I'm going to go through these. So just to show in detail how to set this workflow up, I'm going to delete the 3 existing actions here and recreate them from scratch. If we go back to our demo page, we can see from the instructions that there are 3 specific steps, and the first one is to create a checkout session using the Stripe Connect create checkout session workflow action. This will be found under the plugin section of your workflow actions. The first field we need to look at is the success URL, and this is the URL the user is redirected to if they successfully complete a session on the Stripe checkout session page, basically if they do purchase a good. You can see there I've taken the URL of my demo page, and instead of having return equals true at the end, I've put in success equals true. We need to do a very similar thing for the cancel URL. As the name suggests, this is what happens if a user cancels or does not make a purchase despite going to the Stripe checkout session page. And the next thing we're going to look at is the Stripe account ID. This is the Stripe account ID of the merchant who is selling the good or the service. So in this case here, we're going to be using the current user's Stripe account ID because remember, we're just after onboarding the current user and they have their own Stripe account ID. They're acting as the merchant. The next thing we're going to look at is the price of the good. And what's important to remember here is this is going to be in cents. So I want to charge €50 for this good. So in reality, I'm going to put in 5,000 as the number because again, it's in cents rather than dollars, or euros, or whatever particular currency we're talking about. The next value I'm going to put in is a platform fee. So this is the cut that your application or marketplace is going to take of the overall transaction. This can be a nominal figure, like I've put in here with 1,000 cents or €10, or it can be a percentage. I'm going to go through how you can implement the percentage cut later on in the demo, but for now I'm just going to put in 1,000 cents, which is €10 or 20% of the overall product's cost. The next variable up is quantity, and I'm going to leave this as 1, but you can put in more than 1 if you wish to do so. You'll need to put a 3-digit currency code in the currency field, and it must be a currency that's supported by Stripe. I've put a link to all the currencies supported by Stripe in the description for this field, so check it out if you're not sure. Next, we're going to put in the product name. For this particular case, I'm putting in demo product, but you could of course use dynamic values. And then the last field is this on behalf of field. This is quite important, and I'm actually going to treat this separately later on in the demo, but at a high level, it essentially describes whether it's the platform or the user themselves who shows up on the receipt and is in fact the person who is described as the merchant. That's the first step in our workflow completed. So now let's move on to actually saving the payment ID of the transaction to our database. If we take a look at how I've set up my database, I've created a custom data type called transaction, and you'll see here there are a number of custom fields that I've input. What we basically want to do is create a record of any transactions that are processed on our app so that we can recall information on those transactions at a later stage if we so wish. So I'm creating a new thing. I'm creating a transaction, and I'm going to say down 3 specific fields. The first thing is the amount, which is of course the price of the good or service that was sold. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to result of step 1 and get the amount from that. The second thing I'm going to save down is the payment intent ID, and this is the unique ID that Stripe associates to every payment intent. And again, this is what we're going to recall at a later stage if we want to get information on the transaction. Finally, we're also going to save down the seller ID just so we know which specific merchant made the sale of this particular good or service. In this case, I'm going to use current user Stripe account ID, but you'll see when I go through my Etsy example in a minute that we're going to use the merchant that's responsible for each specific shop for that field. Our final step is probably the most simple. It's simply navigating to the URL that's created in step 1 of this process. So we're going to go result of step 1 and the URL. Now that we've completed our 3 steps, we can test this out. You'll see I still have the return equals true in the URL here, so I'm just going to get rid of that so we have a clean page. We're then going to scroll down to the creating Stripe checkout sessions section again. And before I click on the marketplace payment button, I just want to highlight the test card details that are here. We obviously don't want to be using real credit card details given we're in test mode and just implementing our plugin. So these are test card details that Stripe have provided and you can use for testing any transactions. Once I click on the marketplace payment button, you can see we're redirected to a Stripe checkout page. A couple of things to point out here. You'll notice qualified is once again the name of the platform. Again, that's because I have used an old Stripe Connect account where qualified was the name of my business. If you use your own API keys, you'll have your own platform's name in here. You'll see the demo product name is there and the €50 is also there. So we're going to fill out some details. Again, I'm just going to use dummy data here. You can see I'm using the test card details as provided by Stripe. And we'll click pay. What we'll see now is once this transaction goes through is that we'll be redirected to the success URL that we provided when we were implementing step 1 of the workflow. And sure enough, you can see we're back on the index page for our demo app, and there's also a success equals true parameter that's in the URL. I'm now just going to show this payment and how it went through in Stripe. So if you go to the connect section of your dashboard, I'm just going to click on the merchant that we previously registered as part of the onboarding process. If we click on them, we'll be able to see a list of payments associated with that account. And what you'll see is there's a total balance of €40, but a total volume of €50. The €10 difference is, of course, the fee that went to the platform. So you can see here that's a successful payment. But if we look at the collected fees, you'll see there's a €10 fee that has gone to the platform, which is qualified in this case. If we click on the home section of our Stripe dashboard, we'll see that today we did a gross volume of €50, so that's that one transaction, but we have a balance of €7.91. Now that €7.91 is in reality the €10 application fee that we collected minus the Stripe costs. So Stripe do have a range of charges and the remaining part is what's left of that. Now that we've gone through how to process payments, I want to go back to the on behalf of parameter that I mentioned that was in the first step of that workflow. The on behalf parameter basically describes whether it's going to be the platform or whether it's going to be the merchant that's going to show up on the receipt and is ultimately going to be the entity where the charge is settled. You can read more about the on behalf of parameter in the link that's in this field description, and I would encourage you to do so because Stripe does give some good detail on the pros and cons of using it. One of the big disadvantages of setting the on behalf of parameter to no, or basically getting the platform to be the entity where the charge is settled, is that if the connected account and the platform are based in different payment zones, you will not be able to process the charge. To demonstrate this, I'm going to create another Stripe Connect Express account, but this time instead of using Ireland as the legal residence of the Connect account that's being created, I'm going to set it to US. So we'll have a scenario where the Stripe Connect account and the platform are based in different territories, and as you'll see, we're not going to be able to process the charge. I'm going to speed through the process of registering this user. If you do look at it, you will notice that some of the steps are slightly different to what happened when I initially registered a user with an Irish nationality. This is to be expected as Stripe does have different requirements for different users in different geographies. Okay, so now we've registered that merchant whose Stripe Connect account is going to be based in the US. And you'll see that when we click on a marketplace payment, we're brought to the Stripe checkout page as before. But when we ultimately click on the purchase button and attempt to make the purchase, we'll get this error code. This error code is basically saying that because the connected account and the platform are based in different geographies, the charge cannot be settled. However, by using the on behalf of parameter, we can get around this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my bubble editor, and instead of setting the on behalf of to no, we're actually going to set the on behalf of parameter to yes. Because we're setting the on behalf of parameter to yes, the merchant, which in this case is going to be a US based account, is going to be the entity to where the charge is settled. And because we have done that, we will be able to process that payment successfully, as we will now see. You will notice that instead of qualified being the entity that shows up on the Stripe checkout page, it's the merchant's company that is listed, i.e. Cranford Tech, in this example. You can see this time this charge has been successfully processed. And let's just take a look at how that looks on our Stripe dashboard. So if we go back up to Stripe and take a look at the Connect section, we can see the account that we've just registered. And you'll notice that it's a US based account. And if we go into that account, we can see the payment that has just gone through it. Remember, it was a €50 sale with €10 going to the application. And you'll see that went through. The numbers are slightly different because Stripe has converted it to dollars from euros for us. But you can see the payment there outlined. And if we actually go to the payment section of the dashboard, we can see exactly how they got that dollar amount. You will see that they've converted it and the exchange rate is given, and the fees charged by Stripe are also included in this section of the dashboard. So that's the on behalf of parameter. The next thing we're going to look at is putting together everything we've learned so far and implement to an actual real life example. For this purpose, I've built an Etsy clone, and we're going to show how you might implement the Stripe Connect plugin into a marketplace like Etsy. Before I do that, if you're not subscribed to the channel already, I would really appreciate if you could do so. It always does help in growing the channel. Now, onto our example. I've created a mini app, much like Etsy, where users can register for Stripe Connect accounts, put up products for sale, with other people then able to purchase those products. You'll see on the home screen of my mini app here, there's a number of goods for sale. And if we click on one of them, we're brought to that products page. And as I'll show later on, you can click buy on that and be brought to a Stripe checkout page where you can then actually purchase the good. All pages in this app, you can view the editor for them. It is not on private, and I put a link at the top of every page. So if you want to take a closer look at the workflows, please feel free to do so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the Metsy, as I'm calling this app, homepage, and I'm going to click on the seller sign up button. Once we click on the seller sign up button, we're brought to an onboarding page. And much like many other onboarding pages, it just contains some basic info. We're talking email, password, and then a shop name along with a shop logo image. If we go to this page's editor, we can take a look at the workflow that's associated with the register as a seller button. So we're going to go and click on that now. You'll see that a lot of the steps here are very much standard sign up steps. We're talking basic things like sign up the user, log in the user, save down some details about the user. But there's a couple of things that are specific to the Stripe Connect plugin that I'm going to go through. You can see here that I'm creating a shop for the user, but I'm also creating an Express account. So this is very much embedded in the sign up flow. It's using the current user's email, and I'm also saving down the same information that I would have done earlier as part of the sign up workflow. I'm putting in the refresh URL and the return URL. It's going to be a bit different in this stage because it's going to bring it back to the user's shop, as we'll see in a minute. So I'm going to quickly put in those details that are required. And you'll see once I click on the register as a seller button, I'm redirected to the Stripe onboarding page as we've previously seen. I'm going to go through this really quickly as we've already seen this. Okay, we've now successfully onboarded our merchant and we've been redirected to the My Shop page, which basically has a bunch of details about each merchant that's been onboarded. I'm going to add a product for this merchant. I'm just going to add in a pair of flip-flops, pretty expensive at €40. And once we've uploaded all of the details for this product and click add product, what we'll basically see is it appears here on the My Shop page, but it also appears on the Metsy homepage as an item that users may be able to purchase if they so wish. So you can see there we had our 3 previous projects and now we've added in the flip-flops. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out, so I'm no longer going to be acting as a merchant, and I'm just going to be like a normal visitor who wants to purchase something. I'll then click on the flip-flops and be brought to the specific product page for those flip-flops. Before I click the buy button, I just want to show you the workflow that's actually associated with the buy button. So if we click on that, you will see that it's very similar to the 3 steps that we had earlier for creating a Stripe checkout session. We're using the Stripe Connect create checkout session workflow. We're putting in a success URL, a cancel URL. We're putting in Stripe account ID, which in this case is going to be the product owner's Stripe account ID. So it's going to be that Stripe merchant that we just previously onboarded. A couple of things to point out about this product's price and also the platform fee associated with it. The first thing is you'll notice with the price that it's pulled in dynamically from the data. So it's not, a flat 1,000, 2,000 like we had previously. It's based on the price that I put in earlier for that product. You'll also notice that I'm multiplying by 100. And the reason I'm multiplying it by 100 is because, as I mentioned earlier, we want this to be in cents terms. And I put in 40 for the product price earlier. The last thing I want to point out is the platform fee is a percentage of the product price itself. In this case, you can see I'm taking 20%, and that's going to be the platform fee. The quantity is going to be 1, currency is going to be euro, and I can actually spot an error there with the product name. Instead of it being related to the Stripe account ID of the product owner, it should really only be parent group's product name. So let's correct that there. Before I click buy, I just want to take a quick look at the database and show you the relevant data that's going to be on the Stripe checkout page. You can see here we have the price in 40. Again, we need to multiply that by 100 to get to 4,000 cents. We have the product name, and we have some other details as well. So let's reload our page and then click on the buy button, and we should be brought to a Stripe checkout page. So as you can see, the product name is up there in terms of flip-flops. You can see there we have our €40 charge, which is going to be split between the merchant and the platform. So let's put in some test details and see this purchase go through. So that's gone through successfully. We're now being redirected to the Metsy homepage. I have this pop-up that gets triggered whenever success equals true is in the URL. And if I click on the continue shopping button, it just closes that down. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to log back in as that merchant that we onboarded a minute ago, because that merchant now has a sale recorded. And I just want to show you how you can let the merchant know he's made a sale or she's made a sale, and also access the Stripe Connect Express dashboard where they can get more details on their sales and transactions in general. So I've just run as that merchant that was originally onboarded, and I'm going to go back down to the Etsy Marketplace example, click on that, and then I'm going to click on Metsy My Shop, which again you might remember is where a lot of the details are for each merchant. And you'll see a couple of things on this page. First of all, we now have a pending balance of €32 and an available balance of €0. Pending balances describe sales you made, but funds that are not yet ready to be paid out because they don't align with your payout schedule. You may remember earlier on we set a daily payout schedule for this user, so I expect these funds to become available tomorrow, at which point they'll be ready to be paid out. The way we get information on pending and available balances is using the retrieve connect account balances API call. So if we look at the page editor for this page, you'll see that I'm using the retrieve connected accounts balances, I should say, API call to bring in the relevant data. I've done a bit of formatting to transfer this to, or transform this to currency, but it's quite simple. You just use that API call I mentioned, and you put in the current user's Stripe account ID. Very same story for available balance. I've previously done pending balance. Use that API call to pull in the relevant data. The last thing I want to show for this part of the tutorial is how to allow users to access their Stripe Express dashboard. The Stripe Express dashboard is a really nice dashboard that Stripe create for each connected account, and you can see any payments that they should receive. For example, here you can see that €32 from the €40 sale that particular merchant made, has that list of transactions, and it will show on the overview the available and the pending balances for this payment. Building the workflow to allow users to access the Stripe Express dashboard is pretty simple. We'll take a look at it now. It actually only involves 2 steps. So if we go into the Metsy My Shop page and look at the workflow associated with that button, what you'll see is we're using 2 actions here. We're using the Stripe Connect Create Express Dashboard link, which is one of the actions you'll find underneath the plugin section. And then we're running a bit of JavaScript to open it up in an external tab. I should say it's not a requirement to run the JavaScript and open it up in an external tab. You could just as easily navigate to an external URL like we've previously done for the onboarding process. So rather than deleting and recreating these 2 actions, I'm just going to build them again from scratch as step 3s and 4. As I mentioned, the first step is going to be using the Stripe Connect Create Express Dashboard link. The Stripe account ID relevant for this field here is going to be the current user's Stripe account ID. And that's really all there is for the first step. And then for the second step, if you do want to open it up in an external tab, what you will need to do first is install the Toolbox plugin. It's a free plugin, found very easily by looking at the plugins tab. And then you're going to want to run the following code in the run JavaScript workflow action. I'm not going to write it in again here, but you can see it there from step 2. Do feel free to look at the editor and copy this if you like. So that's really all there is to allowing users to access their Stripe Express dashboard. I'm going to delete those 2 additional steps and we're good to go on that front. The very last thing I want to go through in this tutorial is to show you how to let users update their payout schedule. You'll see here that the current payout schedule for the user is daily. That was part of the initial workflow we had when we set up that user's Stripe Connect Express account. But let's say we want that user to get paid out on a monthly basis rather than on a daily basis. So before we get into that, just want to show you how I'm pulling in the current payout schedule. I'm using that retrieve account details API call once again. You'll see that's inside there. So I'm just going to delete that and recreate it just so you're sure as to how that's created. So we're going to insert dynamic data, get data from an external API, use the retrieve account details API call. Once again, we'll need to put in the current user's Stripe account ID as a path. There's lots of information you can pull in using this API call. We're going to scroll all the way down to settings and then get a payout schedule interval as the relevant field we want for this particular field. So that's how you pull in the current payout schedule for the user. What I've done here is a bit complex, but it's nothing you can't do yourself. First of all, we're looking at these icons here, and these are icons rather than checkboxes. And you'll see that when this custom state that I've created, and I'll show in a second, contains a certain piece of text, those icons are going to change from empty circles to full circles. The custom state that triggers this conditional is on the page itself. So if you see here, click on the page with information, we have that custom state called payout interval. And the way that initially gets loaded is if we go into our workflow, what we'll see here is a workflow that runs when the page is loaded, and it sets that custom state to equal the current user's payout interval. So again, we're using the API call to pull in the current user's payout interval. That's setting it on the custom state of the page, which in turn triggers whether those icons show as clicked or whether they remain as empty circles. You'll see down here towards the bottom of the page, I have 6 green boxes, and you can think of these as 2 sets of 3, and then one each of 3 is for daily, weekly, and monthly. I'm just going to show what happens when I click on the monthly icon, just to give you a sense of how this works underneath the hood. So current payout schedule is daily, but we want to change that to monthly. So we click on the icon. That changes the custom state, which in turn changes the icon shown. As you'll see here, when the icon monthly is clicked and it's not already, the custom state itself isn't already set to monthly, it sets that state, but we haven't actually changed the payout interval itself yet. So you can see here that custom state is going to go to monthly. And then when we click on the update payout schedule button, we're using an action associated with the Stripe Connect plugin. You can see that's that one there, and Stripe Connect update payout schedule. And we're using the current user Stripe account ID, and we're changing the payout interval to monthly. You can also use the monthly anchor there if you wish. Crucially, it's in refreshing the page, which means that the custom state is going to get updated, or it's going to get set as monthly in this case. And then we're going to show an alert just to confirm that's happened. So we're going to click on the update payout schedule button. You can see here we have the alert at the top of the page saying you've updated your payout schedule. If we scroll down, you'll see the current payout schedule is now being put in as monthly, and we have our payouts now set to a monthly schedule. It's the exact same logic to change to weekly or to change back to daily. So you can look at those workflows yourselves in the editor. Again, it is open to everyone. But that's it from this tutorial. I hope you found it valuable, and if you have any questions, do leave them in the comment section.